France, a holiday home fire leaves 11 people dead.
Rescuers say 17 people were safely evacuated from the building. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. ASEAN nations to discuss West Philippine Sea Code of Conduct with China in Manila. Philippines reaffirms its diplomatic ties with Zimbabwe and Vietnam. Ecuador's Guillermo Lasso declares state of emergency after a presidential candidate was shot dead. Hawaiian wildfires displace hundreds of residents. And SB 1918 wins this year's Billboard Fan Army Face-Off. The House of Representatives approves two bills incorporating climate proofing in building codes, setting minimum standards for the construction and maintenance of buildings. House Bill 8500, or the proposed New Philippine Buildings Act, or Building Act, details building standards that would protect the public against multiple hazards like fire, typhoons, and earthquakes. It also features classifications to be used by the Department of Public Works and Highways to implement the construction standards and requirements. The House also approves House Bill 8569, which instead aims to implement a tree planting plan for residential, commercial, industrial, and public building development projects. The plan is expected to enhance environmental quality and mitigate the effects of climate change.
The Metro Manila Development Authority, or MMDA, announces its cancellation of road work while mall-wide sales are postponed in several areas between August 17 and September 10. This is ahead of the upcoming International Basketball Federation, or FIBA, World Cup on August 25. According to MMDA, the following areas are those with zero mall sales and construction-free thoroughfares: EDSA Monumento to SM Mall of Asia, Kalayaan Avenue, C5 Road to EDSA, along Jokno Boulevard, Pio Campos Street, Taft Avenue to Rojas Boulevard, Nia Road to UN Avenue, along Meralco Avenue, Ortigas Avenue EDSA to C5 Road, and EDSA North Avenue to Agam Road. Furthermore, MMDA reminds that mall-wide sales are prohibited in malls along EDSA and other regions affected by the FIBA World Cup 2023.
Recent recovering inflation rate, the Philippine economy is still reeling from its effects, recording the weakest growth since 2011. National statistician Dennis Mapas says the local economy grew at a slower pace of 4.3% in the second quarter, significantly weaker than the 6.4% in the previous quarter and the 7.5% achieved during the same period last year. The Philippine economy last recorded a quarterly growth rate below or at the 4% level back in 2011. National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan emphasizes that the slow growth is due to the interest rate hikes imposed in 2022 and early this year. The rate hikes were necessary to maintain the rising commodity prices.
Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma lauds the National Council Against Child Labor, or NCACL, as the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, publishes a special report detailing a significant decrease in child laborers in 2022. Vin Pascua tells us more.
As per the country's laws, the minimum employable age is set at 15 years, allowing those between ages of 15 and 18 to work so long as they are not subject to any exploitation. The PSA special report records a decrease from 935,000 child laborers in 2021 to 828,000 children in 2022, representing an 11.4% drop. Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma ensures that the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, will continue to work with the NCACL to reach the target of zero child laborers in the country. The child laborers already identified have been provided with educational, medical, and legal assistance, among others, including various services and aid to their families. Dole has been working on improving their systems and strategies to find and accommodate the children affected, including a recently launched Batang Malaya child labor knowledge sharing system where the public may report a child labor incident. They will also continue to monitor and inspect establishments employing children to make sure none are being exploited or harassed. Vin Pasqua, reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Bureau of Immigration issues its guidelines for international travelers entering and exiting the country. This is after Malacanang's decision to lift the nationwide COVID-19 health emergency status. According to the Immigration Bureau, inbound foreign tourists and temporary visitors are required to present passports valid for at least 6 months or valid visas unless they are re-entitled to visa-free entry. The Bureau notes that foreign travelers should have valid return tickets except if they are foreign spouses, children children of returning Filipinos or former citizens with balikbayan privileges. Meanwhile, foreign immigrants and non-immigrants should present their alien certificates of registration, identity, ACRI card. This is not applicable to those holding business visas during arrival and departure inspection.
Philippine Ambassador to the United States Jose Manuel Romualdez confirms that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will not be attending the United Nations General Assembly, or UNGA, scheduled for September. Romualdez did not provide any details on the reason. The UNGA comes amid rising tensions in the West Philippine Sea, with some senators proposing to raise China's aggressive actions before the UNGA. This includes the water cannon incident in Ayungin Shoal.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations will resume negotiations for a code of conduct on the West Philippine Sea in Manila this 22nd to 24th of August. In recent developments, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo expressed his anticipation for a comprehensive and impactful code of conduct, a sentiment shared during the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting held in Indonesia. During the meeting, the guidelines to accelerate negotiations for the code of conduct in the South China Sea was formally adopted. With the recent Chinese Coast Guard harassment in Ayungin Shoal, maritime law expert J. Batong Bakal says that the government must choose to take part or walk away from the negotiations, with both being viable options.
Philippines asserts its strong desire to cooperate and establish partnerships with Zimbabwe and Vietnam. Prince Limorero reports.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. welcomes Her Excellency Constance Chemwai, the non-resident ambassador-designate of the Republic of Zimbabwe to the Philippines in Malacanang Palace. The envoy presents her letter of credence to the President as part of her diplomatic assignment in the country. During the ceremony, she highlights the friendly relations between Zimbabwe and the Philippines, as the two countries assert further advancement of their economic cooperation. The President reaffirms Zimbabwe's intention toward forging a bilateral partnership under the 43-year-old diplomatic ties between the two nations. Meanwhile, the President receives Ambassador of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to the Philippines, Wang Huy-chung, in a farewell call in Malacanang Palace. The envoy expresses his support for the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, to resolve maritime disputes in the South China Sea. He also asserts the need to promote navigation of freedom in the contested sea lane. Philippines and Vietnam established their strategic cooperation in the year 2015. This is to enhance maritime partnership, which includes joint activities in the South China Sea under the foundation of domestic and international law. Under the Marcos administration, the Department of Foreign Affairs is tasked to hold talks with Vietnam regarding the 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone of the country. This comes after the bilateral meeting between President Marcos and Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh on the sidelines of the 42nd Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia last May. Prince Limonero for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, Kim Jong-un sacks his top general in a bid to strengthen his military might. A presidential candidate in Ecuador is shot dead during his own political rally. And more countries from the global south are breaking away from the U.S. Stay tuned for more stories around the globe when we return.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart.
Meron tayong makakasama. Tawagin na natin siya. Walang iba kundi si Vivo!
Niligtas mo na yung sarili mo! Bakit? Maganda naman yung mga babae sa tribo dito. Ay, sige, una ka na! May pinagmanahan ka! Tumigil ka na! Tiger! Tinawag niya ako gate crasher, Tiger! Tama na! Oo, matigas talaga ulo ko.
Susumbong ka sa nanay mo eh.
Wag!
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. The Eritrean government condemns its exiles for its violence against events overseas. This is after the anti-Eritrean government movement stormed different Eritrean events due to its country's repressive authority. Last month, at least 22 officers in Gisen were injured as demonstrators hurled smoke bombs to force their way into the event. Meanwhile, in Stockholm, police report more than 50 people were injured as clashes broke out against an Eritrean pro-government event. About 1,000 demonstrators break through the police barrier and eventually tore down tents on the venue. Sources say the group behind the attacks have mass discontent and anger against Eritrea's regime.
The National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, or CNSP, accuses France of destabilizing Niger, claiming that France has released 16 terrorist leaders and even breached into Nigerian airspace.
Dans leur volonté manifeste de déstabilisation, ces forces françaises ont fait décoller ce jour 9 août 2023 un avion militaire de type A400M de N'Djamena à 6h01 locale. Cet aéronef a volontairement coupé tout contact avec le contrôle aérien à l'entrée de notre espace de 6h39 à 11h15 locale.
The 16 terrorist leaders allegedly attacked military camps at about the same time as the French aircraft entered Nigerian airspace and were subsequently repelled by Niger's National Guard. Casualties or damages have yet to be disclosed. France refutes the accusations, clarifying that the recent aircraft movements were conducted as part of a pre-existing agreement with Nigerian forces.
President Arif Alvi of Pakistan has dissolved the National Assembly as part of the procedural steps preceding the upcoming general election scheduled for November. Typically, the dissolution of the National Assembly is a customary step before a general election, but this time a possible delay is looming due to the potential need for redistricting impacting the election timeline. The ambiguity surrounding the election date aligns with the ongoing legal and political turmoil involving former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Despite being one of the most popular politicians in the country, Imran Khan has been excluded from the election, having been disqualified from running for public office for a period of 5 years.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has dismissed the military's top general in a bid to take a more aggressive approach toward war preparation, weapons production, and military drill expansion. North Korean state news agency KCNA reports that Chief of General Staff Pak Soo-il has been replaced by General Ri Yong-gil, but gave no further details. Ri currently holds a position in Kim's cabinet as his defense minister, but it remains unclear if he would retain the role. Kim's moves emerged during a meeting of his party's Central Military Commission after he visited weapons factories where he called for more missile engines, artillery, and other weapons to be built. He also called for more military drills to efficiently operate the latest weapons and equipment in order to maintain a mobilized posture for combat at all times. North Korea is set to stage a militia parade on September 9, marking the 75th anniversary of the founding of the republic. North Korea has also been reported to be training a larger number of paramilitary groups to bolster its current military force.
One killed and dozens more injured after the explosion in Sergiev Posad near Moscow, while Ukraine accuses Russia of attacking the city of Zaporizhia that killed 2 and wounded 7. 60 people were reportedly injured and several more are still missing in the unexplained explosion of an optical equipment factory in Sergiev Posad. Moscow Region Governor Andrei Vorobov reports that all people from buildings and workshops near the factory have been evacuated. A rescue mission is still ongoing for the missing individuals who might be under the rubble. In the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, an alleged Russian missile attack kills 2 and wounds 7 others. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky initially announced that 3 were killed, but Ukraine's Interior Minister Igor Klimenko reports that 1 was resuscitated afterward.
The Polish government announced its plan of deploying an additional 2,000 troops to its border with Belarus, twice the number the border guard agency had requested. This development comes as Poland migration pressure on the Polish-Belarusian border area is growing. State news agency PAP announced the measure as Deputy Interior Minister Maciej Wasik announced the decision and accused the Belarusian authorities of organizing illegal migration. Large numbers of migrants from the Middle East and Africa arrived at the border with their travel facilitated by flights and visas provided by the Minsk government, a tactic that Warsaw describes as a form of hybrid warfare. Polish authorities retaliated by building a tall steel wall, which has reduced the number of migrants and refugees crossing the border, but did not stop them entirely. Earlier this week, Belarus also began military exercises near its border with Poland and Lithuania. And last week, 2 Belarusian helicopters flew briefly into Polish airspace in what was viewed by Warsaw as a deliberate provocation.
Britain's housing of migrants on the Baby Stockholm barge off the southwest coast draws criticism from locals, rights advocates, and MPs due to suitability concerns and perceived inhumanity, despite officials' assurance of safety checks. From United Kingdom, Arian Celestino reports.
Britain on Monday began housing migrants on board a barge docked off the southwest English coast. in its latest controversial immigration policy that has drawn heavy criticism from locals and Bride's campaigners. The baby Stockholm, which has moored for weeks in Portland on the Dorset coastline, accepted the first of up to 500 young male inhabitants due to stay there after a series of delays. The decision to dock the vessel in Portland, a small island with a population of about 13,600 people, has prompted a backlash from some locals, including its conservative MP, who argue the area is ill-suited to the task. Rights advocates have also hit out at the policy, saying the barge is unfit for the purpose, with protesters from either side showing up at the waterfront site in recent weeks. Steve Valdez-Simmons of Amnesty International UK branded the barge a shameful way to house people who fled terror, conflict, and persecution. It was previously used by Germany and Netherlands to house homeless people and asylum seekers, but opponents in Britain have noted it was previously described as an oppressive environment. A number of migrants did not board the barge after legal moves. Steve Smith, Chief Executive of refugee charity Care for Calais, said that none of the asylum seekers they are supporting have gone to the BB Stockholm on that day, adding that they had suffered torture, modern slavery, and had traumatic experiences at sea. He also mentioned that to house any human being in a quasi-floating prison like the BB Stockholm is inhumane, and to try and to do so with this group of people is unbelievably cruel. The Firefighters Union last week called for an urgent meeting with the Interior Ministry over safety concerns raised, but officials have said it passed all necessary checks. From London, United Kingdom, this is Arian Celestino for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The UK on Tuesday placed sanctions on 25 companies and individuals to close the net on Russian President Vladimir Putin's access to foreign military equipment. From London, United Kingdom, Margaret Lou Gomez reports.
The UK on Tuesday placed sanctions on 25 companies and individuals to close the net on Russian President Vladimir Putin's access to foreign military equipment. Those targeted include people and businesses in Turkey, Dubai, Slovakia, and Switzerland that the Foreign Office said are supporting the illegal war in Ukraine. Sanctions have also been imposed on Iranians involved in producing drones for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, and Belarusian defense organizations linked to the manufacturing of military technology for the Belarusian regime. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said today's landmark sanctions will further diminish Russia's arsenal and close the net on supply chains propping up Putin's now struggling defense industry. 3 Russian companies operating in the electronics sector are among those targeted, with the other 22 new sanctions involving entities and individuals outside the country. These include 2 Turkey-based businesses said to be exporting microelectronics to Russia's military and a Dubai-based supplier of drone components. This comes as part of a wider sanctions package targeting those that the UK deems critical to supplying and funding Putin's war machine, and is the biggest ever UK action on military suppliers in third countries. This is Margaret Lou Gomez reporting from London, United Kingdom, from Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
In an unfortunate turn of events, just days after Ecuador's electoral body said that it was doing everything it can to combat and protect all candidates amid the wave of death threats being thrown around. The president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, has declared a state of emergency across the whole country after the shooting of candidate Fernando Villavicencio.
Y el segundo decreto que declara el estado de excepción por 60 días. Las Fuerzas Armadas, a partir de este momento, se movilizan en todo el territorio nacional para garantizar la seguridad de los ciudadanos, la tranquilidad del país y las elecciones libres y democráticas del 20 de agosto.
In a harrowing scene during a political rally, a burst of shots killed presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio. Social media coverage shows Villavicencio walking to his car when the attack began, leaving 9 injured, including a candidate for assembly and 2 police officers. Inside the school where Villavicencio had been holding a political rally, bodies were falling to the ground to protect themselves from the bullets, while others ran away in desperate panic, causing a stampede, further injuring others. People describe the sequence of events as akin to a horror movie, as a volley of 30 to 40 shots were fired, directed toward the candidate and his entourage. He was one of 8 presidential candidates for the early general election on August 20. He vowed to be hard on corruption and criminal entities that cripple the country, but now his death sparked complaints about the crime that plagues the country.
¡Viva Quito! En esta ciudad que dimos las mayores batallas en contra de la tiranía. En esta ciudad donde escribimos grandes historias sobre la tiranía. En esta ciudad vamos a escribir el 20 de agosto la historia final de la rebelión de la democracia, de la lucha en contra de la corrupción, en contra de las mafias que han sometido a esta patria durante 20 años. El 20 de agosto, compañeras y compañeros, se decide entre la mafia y la patria. O triunfan los mafiosos, o regresan los mafiosos, o la gente buena, los demócratas, la gente valiente, gana la batalla, gana la patria.
Last week, Villavicencio twice denounced threats against his life and his campaign team. He remained in police custody after being intimidated, allegedly by a leader of a criminal gang linked to drug trafficking. 6 people were detained on suspicion of the attack.
Aquí nada es gratis. Aquí nos cuesta la vida. A nosotros esta democracia nos ha costado la vida. Defender esta patria nos ha costado la vida y no vamos a permitir una nueva traición.
President Joe Biden prohibits the United States government to invest in certain Chinese technologies and requires alternative options in the sector. This is after the U.S. president inks an executive order regarding its national security technologies and products in countries of concern. Biden declares a national emergency to deal with the threat of advancement by countries like China in areas of sensitive technologies concerning to military, intelligence, surveillance, or cyber-enabled capabilities. Meanwhile, the U.S. Congress reaffirms Biden's call to establish restrictions in law over American investments that funded Chinese military advancement.
The U.S. and its Western partners let trade run free with various nations' currency tied to the U.S. dollar, with the countries tailoring their foreign policies to further cater to America's needs. Now, developing countries, often called the Global South, are quietly revising them as they now see a chance to chart their own economic futures, given the weakening of the dollar and the current global economic crisis. The Global South is a term that broadly comprises countries in the regions of Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Asia, and Oceania. Developing nations are demanding control of their resources, reordering a relationship from colonial times, in part by insisting on factories in their own countries. Joining Namibia and Zimbabwe, Ghana is preparing to ban exports of lithium. Indonesia just recently prohibited the export of nickel ores. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Indonesia are welcoming investments in EV battery plants from China rather than the U.S. While visiting China in April, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva questioned why the dollar should be the all-powerful currency. Adding a geopolitical component, countries are no longer picking sides in fights between the West and Russia or the U.S. and China. The great powers have soured many in the global South with the debt ceiling controversy, political disarray in the U.S., China's GDP falling fast, and the Brexit taking full effect in the UK. Up next, a wildfire in Hawaii causes significant damage. Multiple casualties have occurred at a fire in a French holiday home. And the Amazon Summit calls on developed nations to fulfill their climate commitments. Please don't go away. We've got more stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by Robic Builders.
Sa tuwing namimili sa mga palengke o supermarket, abay, talagang mapapadaing ka na. Grocery sa kapalengke, ano napansin mo sa galaw?
Nakakatakot. At dahil nga bumagyo, talagang lahat nagtaasan. At this day and age, there's no more brand loyalty. Doon ka napupunta sa mura.
Itong dagok ng inflation na to talagang iba. Kasi dahil nanggaling tayo sa pandemic, nakikita natin na talagang nawala yung supply chain natin.
Kaya pa ba ni Juan ang tumaas na presyo ng mga bilihin? Mag-reality check tayo. 1,000 ngayon, ano lamang ng bayong mo?
Wala kang bayong, sando bag.
American nurse Alex Dorsonville and her daughter were released after being kidnapped last month. According to El Roy authorities, Dorsonville and her child were held hostage in Port-au-Prince after being abducted from the community ministry compound. The organization confirms that the two were safe and recovering. Meanwhile, the United States Department welcomes the report of the release of the two from their captivity in Haiti. Haitian National Police say they have no comment on the matter as investigations are still ongoing.
Mexico has taken swift action by shutting down 23 pharmacies following a 4-day investigation and subsequent raids after warnings from the United States about counterfeit drugs laced with fentanyl, heroin, and methamphetamine. Mexican investigators discovered irregular sales activities in the 23 pharmacies located in popular Caribbean resorts, including Cancun, Playa del Carmen, and Tulum. These counterfeit pills containing lethal amounts of fentanyl are sold mainly to American tourists, usually branded as Oxycodone, Percocet, and Adderall. Fentanyl is an incredibly potent synthetic opioid accountable for about 70,000 deaths annually in the United States.
Former Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs III was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in jail on charges related to a deadly drunk driving case in 2021. Ruggs pleaded guilty to a charge of driving under the influence, resulting in death after admitting he drove while drunk in the November 2021 accident in Las Vegas. Ruggs was speeding at 156 miles per hour when his Corvette sports car slammed into a vehicle driven by 23-year-old Tina Tinter. Tinter died after her vehicle was engulfed in flames following the crash. Ruggs was transported to the hospital following the accident, where a blood sample revealed he was more than 2 times over the limit. A number of charges were brought against Ruggs, but he entered a plea deal which saw other charges drop. Ruggs was drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders in 2020 out of Alabama and made 20 starts for the team before being released.
A wildfire in Maui, Hawaii has destroyed a historic tourist town, killing 36 people. The images and video clips shown here were gathered by Edith Galvante and family, whose properties were burned to the ground in Lahaina, Hawaii. As the blaze raged through Lahaina town, desperate residents jumped into the ocean in a bid to escape the flames. The United States Coast Guard plucked at least 14 people, 2 of them being children, from the water. But Maui County Mayor Richard Bison says that could change due to the extensive devastation.
We are still in a search and rescue mode, and so I don't know what will happen to that number. We've had many dwellings, businesses, structures that have been burnt, many of them to the ground.
Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Joe Biden has been briefed on the ongoing developments in Hawaii. He specified federal assets such as military equipment and air platforms to supplement the efforts in the island state. He further pledged resources from the U.S. State Departments, such as the Department of Agriculture, to rebuild the industries in Maui. Lahaina is a beachfront tourist town of about 12,000 people. Emergency services have been overwhelmed by this disaster that appears to have erupted without any warning. Power and cell phone service went down as early as Tuesday, but people did not suspect any danger until a sudden shift of winds of up to 130 kilometers per hour fanned the flames of several wildfires in Maui. Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke has issued an emergency proclamation. She says dry conditions and strong winds sparked the blazes. For the people of Lahaina, Luke calls on them to lean on each other.
We need to stand together. We need to be brave for each other.
Heavy rain in southwestern China continues to wreak havoc in the region. A flash flood in Sichuan province Wednesday claimed 7 lives. Arlene Ocampo has the details.
Authorities say the victims had been visiting a popular tourist site and had been taking pictures when a torrent of water swept them away. The bad weather this past week has killed 33 people in Beijing. The dead include 2 rescue workers. Across China, the death toll is nearly 150. Heavy downpours for the past week have caused flooding and building collapses. On Wednesday, residents and workers began mopping up, clearing debris, and repairing damaged property. Tens of thousands of homes have collapsed in the flooding. Residents say their vehicles have been washed away. Storekeepers report their merchandise has been destroyed by floodwaters. Roads, bridges, and other infrastructure have been damaged. Authorities say it could take years to rebuild. Arlene Ocampo from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
11 people have died after fire broke out Wednesday at a holiday home being used by a group of adults with learning disabilities in eastern France. Angel Membreri reports.
The blaze tore through the wooden structure about 6:30 a.m. local time while guests slept. Authorities say 28 people had been in the 2-story building when the fire broke out. Rescuers managed to evacuate 17 of them safely. One of them ended up in hospital. The victims included 10 people with mild learning disabilities and 1 supervisor. Authorities say people on the upper floor could not react quickly enough to escape the flames to safety. Firefighters brought the blaze under control. The building was an old barn that had been renovated a few years ago. The flames completely gutted the structure. Cause of the fire is not known. Angel Membreri for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Thousands of people in Norway who live along the country's longest river have been evacuated after a dam partially collapsed. The dam on the Glama River could not hold back the buildup of water from days of heavy rain. Bruce Balmeo has more details.
Norwegian authorities say the dam's floodgates failed to open. At one point, they considered blowing up part of the dam to prevent communities downstream from being inundated. But after water broke through the structure, authorities scrapped that plan. The military deployed helicopters to help emergency service workers assist people cut off by the flooding. The downpour has triggered landslides and flooding in mountainous regions of Norway. Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre warns that the flooding continues to be a threat. He adds water levels are at their highest in 50 years. Bruce Balmeo for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Climate activist Greta Thunberg pulled out of a much-anticipated event at the Edinburgh International Book Fair on Sunday, citing a sponsor's investment in fossil fuel. In a statement, the climate activist said that she cannot attend an event that receives sponsorship from Baillie Gifford, who invests heavily on the fossil fuel industry, and accusing them of greenwashing. Thunberg was set to appear at the said event starting August 12 for an event called Greta Thunberg, It's Not Too Late to Change the World. Meanwhile, because of Thunberg's move, the fair has been cancelled, as its director Nick Barley and British investment firm Baillie Gifford both defended their ties to the industry. Barley respects Thunberg's decision and applauded her principles. Barley added that they believe the firm is part of the solution to the climate emergency and let the funds help them grow. Baillie Gifford, meanwhile, who has sponsored the fair for 19 years, denied being a significant fossil fuel investor, saying that only 2% of their clients' money is invested in companies with some business related to fossil fuels. Thunberg's decision to opt out of the fair comes after reports that Baillie Gifford's investments have a total of up to $4.5 billion tied to the fossil fuel industry.
At a summit on saving the Amazon rainforest, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva urged wealthy nations to fight against climate change and to do more to protect Earth's disappearing tropical forests.
É que não é o Brasil que precisa de dinheiro, não é a Colômbia que precisa de dinheiro, não é a Venezuela, é a natureza que o desenvolvimento industrial ao longo de 200 anos poluiu, que está precisando que eles paguem a sua parte agora para a gente recompor parte daquilo que foi estragado. Então é a natureza que está precisando de dinheiro. É criar mecanismo para remunerar de forma justa e equitativa os serviços ambientais que as nossas florestas prestam ao mundo. Medidas protecionistas mal disfarçadas de preocupação ambiental por parte dos países ricos não são o caminho a trilhar.
The meeting started Tuesday with an agreement by the 8 countries of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, or ACTO, to launch an alliance to fight deforestation. But despite Brazil's vows to chart an ambitious roadmap to save the Amazon, the summit instead wrapped up with a rebuke of wealthy nations. Leaders of the Amazon countries faced criticism over their failure to adopt a pledge to stop illegal deforestation in the Amazon by 2030 and ban new oil exploration. Speaking on Wednesday, Brazilian President Lula said the Amazon summit gave an opportunity for rainforest nations to unify in advance of October's United Nations Climate Change Conference Summit, or COP28, in Abu Dhabi. Coming right up, Google and Universal Music are in talks to license AI-generated content. Meet the new kids on the block making waves in the sports world. And SB19 fans 18 wins Billboard Fan Army face-off. Catch the latest in business, sports, tech, and entertainment. Mata ng Agila International will be back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
David Portnoy, the founder of Barstool Sports, is once again the owner of his media brand after buying it back from Penn Entertainment. In a social media post on Tuesday, David Portnoy said that Penn Entertainment and Barstool Sports have gone separate ways. The value of the deal was not immediately known, as Barstool Sports was valued at $606 million when Penn bought the rest of the company. Penn said the divestiture was completed in exchange for non-compete and other restrictive covenants, meaning Penn will have the right to 50% of the gross proceeds in the event that Portnoy sells or monetizes Barstool. Walt Disney CEO Bob Iger says it will increase the monthly cost of its ads-free Disney Plus by $3 to almost $14 in October. Iger also announces that Hulu plan fees will also increase to about $18, making it more expensive than Netflix. This is to make its streaming services profitable to recuperate from the substantial net loss of $460 million from a year earlier $1.4 billion profit. The company, however, reports a 4% increase in revenue for the third quarter, while its shares jumped to $89.45 from $87.49. Disney also reports that its international customers lowered down to 146.1 million, a 7.4% decline from the 157.8 million in its second quarter report. Meanwhile, the company sheds about 300,000 domestic subscribers in the third quarter. Analysts say that Disney is in the middle of a strategic reorganization. The company had already cut about 7,000 jobs in order to save $5.5 billion across the company.
What year did the original animated
In a bid to monetize the music industry's biggest threats, Google and Universal Music are in talks to license artists' melodies and vocal likenesses for songs generated by artificial intelligence. Catherine Ortula has the data.
The rise of generative AI has bred a surge in deep fake songs that can convincingly mimic the voices, lyrics, or sound of established artists, often without their consent. Frank Sinatra's voice has been used on a version of the hip-hop song Gangsta's Paradise, while Johnny Cash's has been deployed on the pop single Barbie Girl. The said user also offers songs imitating the voices of deceased rappers Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. Discussions between Google and Universal Music are at an early stage, and no product launch is imminent, but the goal is to develop a tool for fans to create these tracks legitimately and pay the owners of the copyrights for it. The discussions aim to strike a partnership for an industry that is grappling with the implications of new AI technology. Both parties assured those present that artists would always have an option to opt out of the deal. Warner Music, the third largest music label, has also been talking to Google about a similar product. Music executives liken the rise of AI-generated songs to the earlier days of Google-owned YouTube, when users began adding popular songs as the soundtracks to videos they created. The music industry spent years battling with YouTube over copyright infringement, but the two sides established a system that now pays the music industry about $2 billion a year for blanket copyright. The issue was thrust into the spotlight earlier this year when an AI-produced song that mimicked the voices of Drake and The Weeknd went viral online, with Universal Music being home to Drake, Taylor Swift, and other popular musicians. Catherine Ertula for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Bold and responsible approach.
In sports news, Philadelphia Phillies pitcher Michael Lorenzen threw a stunning no-hitter, while the Sacramento Republic Football Club signed the youngest professional athlete in American team sports history. Bernadette Manuel has the story.
Sacramento Republic Football Club announced that it had signed Davion Kimbrough, making him the youngest professional athlete in American team sports history. Kimbrough, aged 13 years, 5 months, and 13 days old, is in his third year with the club and has been playing with the academy team throughout his early years. Kimbrough will be added to the club's first-team roster and continue his development as one of the team's high-potential players in the academy. He will be eligible to compete for Republic FC in USL Championship matches. Kimbrough, born on February 18, 2010, is eligible to debut on Saturday against the Birmingham Legion. Philadelphia Phillies pitcher Michael Lorenzen threw a stunning no-hitter on his home debut just over a week after signing for the club in a trade from the Detroit Tigers. The 31-year-old dominated the Washington Nationals to record only the 14th no-hitter in Phillies history and only the 4th in Major League Baseball this season. Lorenzen struck out 5 and walked 4 in a remarkable 124-pitch outing as the Phillies completed a 7-0 victory at Citizens Bank Park. The Phillies pitcher sealed the no-run game after getting rid of Lane Thomas on a grounder at the start of the 9th inning before striking out Joey Meneses. Dominic Smith was then removed after a fly ball, sparking wild celebrations from Lorenzen and his new Phillies teammates at home plate. Lorenzen said afterward that the raucous support of the Phillies fans had helped get him over the line in the last few innings, where his no-hitter was the 4th one recorded during the 2023 season. Bernadette Manuel reporting for sports in Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Small businesses near the Warner Bros. And Disney studios are in despair as the Hollywood strike hits its 100th day. Tristan Diaz tells us more.
The strike empties offices and sets in and around Burbank. Burbank is the suburbs of Los Angeles. In an effort to cope with the downturn, several businesses shorten opening hours and cut staffing costs. But even those seem not enough to survive the blow. From dry cleaners to caterers to florists to clothing stores to grocers to realtors and swimming pool cleaners, all are dependent on the $70 billion a year in salaries that film and television production generates. A chauffeuring business says it's lost about 75% of its income as only one out of its 4 service cars is working at the moment. In Los Angeles, Tristan Diaz for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
SB19 Fans 18 win Billboard Fan Army Face-Off 2023, marking it a historic triumph for their unwavering support. The P-pop boy band SB19 shows its global presence in the music industry by defeating 63 other international fan bases. 18 competed against the fans of artist icons like Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez, Shakira, and K-pop groups such as EXO and Twice. This competition started on July 5, followed by a fascinating showdown in the final round that was held on August 8. SB19 Fans 18 garnered 51.1% of the total votes, winning over the fans of K-pop group 17 Carats with 48.9% of total votes in the final round. The boy group members Stel, Ken, Pablo, Justin, and Josh have expressed their gratitude for their fan support on social media. This records the first ever victory for a Filipino fandom after they secured a runner-up position against the Stray Kids fan Stays last year.
The second oldest museum in Japan has run out of money, forcing it to resort to crowdfunding to pay its bills. The National Museum of Nature and Science in Tokyo launched a campaign Monday and has already surpassed its goal. Irvin Urquiza reports.
Some 30,000 donors dug deep and contributed $3.4 million to the 146-year-old museum. The Japanese government turned down the museum's request for funding, saying it has its own money problems. Soaring utility costs have left the institution with a lot of red ink on its balance sheet. Utilities this year are expected to cost more than $2.6 million. The museum houses a collection of 5 million artifacts. They range from dinosaur bones to stuffed bears, as well as plant specimens. The collections must be kept at a constant temperature and humidity to avoid deterioration. The fundraising campaign will continue until November 5th. Irvin Urquiza for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
And for your Thursday motivation, here's a quote from well-renowned English theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking. 1, remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. 2, never give up work. Work gives you meaning and purpose, and life is empty without it. 3, if you're lucky enough to find love, remember it is there and don't throw it away.
That was a nice quote from Stephen Hawking. I think he's also reminding us that we kind of have this daily routine, and sometimes we forget to just stop and appreciate our jobs, being surrounded by the people that we love. That's definitely something I'm going to be doing more.
And for a man who's had to go through a lot because he has a condition neurologically and physically, right? And that got in the way of his life. What he said was so full of positivity.
Yes, so we can really see the good amidst everything that we are going through.
And it revolves around gratitude.
Yes. Let's be thankful this Thursday.
Always.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.